Hello, and welcome to the Long Island Local Podcast, brought to you by Audio Workstations here in Bohemia, New York. Let's jump right into the conversation with a Long Island local business owner. Welcome, everyone, to Season 2 of the Long Island Local Podcast. We're here to learn about local businesses here on Long Island. I'm your host, Matt, and behind the curtain is E Engineering, and today we have the privilege of Marc Palker of MPP Associates. Describe to me the journey to accounting, consulting, specializing in strategy and finance. Was it always numbers for you, or was there a first love that was not numbers?
Well, the first love was engineering. And unfortunately, when I was entering college, engineering was kind of an overcrowded profession. So they were steering people in other areas. And if you're an engineer, you're pretty good with math. So they steered us towards accounting. So I applied to schools to major in accounting. That's where I ended up. And interestingly, I ended up attending Rider, which is now University in Trenton, New Jersey. We had 250 accounting majors in the freshman class, and only 11 of us graduated.
Wow.
Now, the other people graduated, but not in accounting. So it was a pretty rigorous curriculum. I enjoyed it. And when I left there, my first position was with JCPenney in the accounting department.
Okay.
So that was where the journey started. It started on the corporate side, not the traditional accounting firm CPA side.
Right.
And I pursued that. And knowing I wasn't going to go the CPA route, I went to St. John's University a year later to start a program to get a master's in finance. And I got the MBA in finance in 1977.
And were you still working for JCPenney when you did the MPA?
No, by
MBA?
then I started with JCPenney, and then I left and was working for another company. Bounced around a number of Long Island companies, I would call small to medium-sized enterprises, some public, some private, which is a whole different world of accounting between the private sector and publicly traded with SEC regulations and so forth.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more red tape and I's to dot and T's to cross when you're dealing with something that's publicly traded.
And due to deadlines, a lot of late nights or no sleep nights,
right,
where you just work straight through to make the deadlines. So that's how I began my career. Early in my career, when I was at JCPenney, I joined an organization called the National Association of Accountants, known today as the Institute of Management Accountants. So that was in 1975.
What is the function of that particular organization?
That organization specialized in accountants in private industry versus the CPA world of auditor or tax. So it's the IBM accountants, the 3M accountants, the Google accountants, the Apple, and so forth that are in-house working for the organization in various different functions. So that journey started in 1975, and in 2015, I was named chair-elect of the board, and in 2016 became chairman of the board of that organization.
Okay. And so as a part of that organization, how much different is it from just working in the industry itself versus working for the organization?
Well, I wasn't working for the organization. I was a volunteer.
Oh, okay. So it's all volunteer, and so it's just extra time now that you're sometimes maybe regretting that you signed up for.
As a lot of people like to hear, it was more money out than money in.
Right.
So actually the money in was zero. But what was good is I got to interact with other professionals from all different corporations all over the country and eventually all over the world. They have a robust education program. They have this certified management accounting program, of which I am a CMA. We have 0 people who are CMAs in the world who have not passed a rigorous examination. There's no grandfathering. There's no anything. You have to pass the exam. So I got that designation in 1991. It has really helped my career in convincing corporations that I understand their side of the business versus the auditor or the tax person.
Okay.
The education that's required, of course, keeps me up to date and constantly teaches me the new things just like in your profession. There's all kinds of new things happening in
Yeah.
what we're doing right today.
Of course, and I know at least in the industry of audio gear and now video gear and stuff, it's really on me to just stay on the internet looking stuff up. And there's, there is something called the Audio Engineering Society, and they do a lot of, academic papers, and they do conventions and stuff, but they're not like required to send you an email when a cool new product comes out that you really ought to know about that's going to change how people do things. You have to stay on that on your own. So who gets to basically put together the exams that you have to take in order to achieve that?
Well, there's a corporate staff in northern New Jersey,
Okay.
which is the headquarters. They have a staff of about 130 in the United States, and the rest of the staff is spread out around the world because the organization is in 140 different countries. I traveled to some of those countries as the chairman of the board to give some of those educational sessions, but also traveled as the ambassador of the organization to our membership, to the governments, and to the corporations located in those countries.
Wow. Okay, so this is an international thing that you get to participate in.
The trip to China was an experience because I had never been that far overseas.
Yeah.
Give you an example, there was an organization in London that we had cooperation with. They flew me to London for a 4-day trip to give a 30-minute speech.
Oh, okay.
So it was really interesting, a lot of fun. Turns out my daughter was in London for business, so we were able to get together since I had a
that's
lot
great.
of free time, 30 minutes out of 4 days.
Yeah, that's a pretty good ratio of work to non-work related enjoyment, hopefully.
But they really wanted somebody that of knowledge that could speak on that particular topic. It was very important to them.
That's awesome. All right. So now how much of your time does that take up versus your other work?
Well, now, even though I'm technically on the board of directors, I consider myself retired because I'm not active in any of the day-to-day.
Okay.
But when I was chairman, it's 20% of a 7-day week.
Wow.
It's that kind of job. So my golf game suffered. My clients didn't. I kept continuing my consulting practice and making sure my clients got what they needed
Right.
the whole time. Because, again, airports, planes, and downtime, and a laptop, you can
Yep.
really get a lot of work done.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of business communication that gets done, and on travel in between destinations like airports. I see it all the time. Luckily, the Wi-Fi is usually pretty good at airports nowadays.
Yes.
You can get into that email. Okay, so now this is going to be a little road back because we mentioned before we started recording this officially that you did have a little foray into the world of broadcast in college. Can we tell the listeners about that?
Sure. When I was in college, I worked at the college radio station. My primary function was business, running the money of the radio station, and I had some good people in front of me who trained me well. But then I ventured out into being a radio jock and doing play-by-play basketball and also some talk shows. It was a lot of fun. It was great. I met some wonderful people at WABC, and I got a job offer when I graduated. I don't know if the money they were going to pay me would cover the cost of the commute.
Yeah.
Forget about, food and shelter and anything else. So I decided to take a job in accounting.
Yeah, because that answers the question I didn't get to ask you earlier when we were talking was how, strong were the chances that you maybe would have had a career in broadcast and media, and it boils down to, yes, these jobs don't often pay as well as they should. That makes perfect sense now. Announcing basketball live takes a very quick brain to mouth connection, and that is important, I think, maybe when you're also working with numbers.
Well, the game is interesting because the game is the final exam.
Right.
You have to do a lot of studying to get there as far as what players look like, what their numbers are, what position they play. And in basketball, they move around pretty quickly. And you can't say that, 17 threw it to 15. You have to have names. You have to know how to pronounce them.
Right.
So there's a lot of upfront work that goes into broadcasting a basketball game.
Yeah, you know what? I never really considered it, but it makes sense. There's a lot of prep work. You have to make it seem like you just know all this stuff off the back of your hand. And, basically the only way to get there is to memorize it.
The good thing about radio is nobody knows if you're wrong. Because I did do a job I did do a game at Madison Square Garden, and for the college games, where you're located is in between the top deck and the deck below it. So seeing the court and seeing the actual players is not the easiest in the world. And when I went to college, which was a long time ago, we didn't have all these fancy monitors that they have today.
Right.
So if you made a mistake, it was okay because nobody knew that you made a mistake.
Right. They couldn't visually check you. Yeah. Now, if you mess up the announcement and they're watching it on TV, they're going to call you out on it, I suppose.
Right. And in today's world, being a consultant to these corporations, you make a mistake, they know right away.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no hiding it. So it's, but it was fun. It was a lot of fun when I was in college. And probably if there was any money in it at the beginning, I probably could have stuck with it. But I did have some obligations I had to take care of and had to go for the larger paycheck.
Yes, I understand. Okay, so to put us back on the chronological track a little bit. So you did a lot of working for corporations in-house, but eventually made the move to consulting for them, right? Meaning that you can have your own business and still, dole out your years of wisdom about what needs to happen when you're working, in-house for a company, but do it on a as-needed basis and do it for more than one corporation at a time. Is that the idea?
That's exactly the idea. The last day I worked for a single corporation as an employee was December 31st, 1996.
Okay.
In January 1st, 1997, I launched my consulting practice, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
All right. How would you compare and contrast your, enjoyment of work or the pros and cons of working for, in the sense of working within or working for in the sense of contracting?
Well, this is not going to sound unusual, but one of the funny things is when you're a consultant, they listen to you. Mm-hmm. When you're an employee, you go back to your office. So
right.
And you're giving the same advice, you have the same intelligence, but they just have a different attitude about consultants.
Yeah, the perceived value changes, right?
Yeah, so I like it because you never know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. You never know who your next client is going to be. You never know what situation they're going to incur. I didn't know when I went to consult to a company on an SEC investigation that they needed to do certain things by a certain date or they were going to be taken off the exchange and charges were going to be pressed against the president and the owners, that I would end up in the middle of 9/11.
Wow.
And not physically in 9/11 when it happened, but the company I was involved with did environmental restoration.
Okay.
So they were involved in a lot of the cleanup. And one of the functions that I brought to the table was putting in a system of billing the customers in a fashion where there would be no questions and we would get paid.
Right.
And it wouldn't be held up because, we're looking at your paperwork or, the way I designed the system and came up with the billing, we were paid on a very timely basis. Let's say, for the argument's sake, I don't remember the exact, but it was approximately 30 days, which is normal business cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. You have like a net 30 and you want people to stick to it and, be able to do things reliably and not have to call them and awkwardly remind them that they haven't paid. And
so, this was in the middle of 9/11, getting workers to do the work, plus, the money to do the work. And, of course, it was very important. We dealt mostly in the asbestos side.
Okay.
So that's also dangerous.
Sure. Tricky.
In order to hire somebody, they need certain licenses for breathing apparatus and so forth.
Is there a lot of coordination with legal departments when it gets to that type of thing, or?
Not really, because we were part of a union. So the union handled all that topside stuff and then just sent us the workers. But the key there was to get the cleanup done and keep the after 9/11 moving along.
Right.
So I got involved in that, and not knowing when you take an assignment 6 months before that, having to do with an SEC investigation.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of excitement you have in this kind of work. I also do turnaround work, which are companies that are trying to avoid bankruptcy.
Okay.
I call them one foot in the grave, one on a banana peel. You know, one slip up and they're out of business. So I try to help them turn around their business, turn around their finances so that they don't have to file bankruptcy, and then they can grow out of the situation.
Okay. And how much percentage of your business would you say is that type of business versus others?
Turnaround's about 25%.
Okay.
Some of the work is systems work where it's not what I call computers. It's really the way the business operates so that the information goes to the computer, not what the computer does with it. That's not my end of the business. I'm not extremely expert in it. I mean, there are areas that I have expertise, but that's not one of them. So I'll usually work with their IT department to say, this is how the business is going to run, this is how the information is going to be fed, and you have to make sure it gets processed in the computer timely and accurately.
Right. So you're not making software, but you have maybe some favorite software applications that you like numbers to be plugged into.
My favorite software when I go into a company is whatever they're using that they did wrong, because then I get paid to fix it.
Okay. Now I'm assuming you have to be like using stuff like QuickBooks, and
I don't use it.
Okay.
They use it. Sometimes I set it up for them. Sometimes I teach them how to use it better. Sometimes I migrate them from something like a QuickBooks to a more robust system like NetSuite.
Okay.
So, and that's been, anybody who's been watching television now, NetSuite is being pretty popular on TV as a replacement for QuickBooks.
Interesting. Okay, yeah.
But in the smaller side, yes, the small companies are using QuickBooks or Xero to keep their accounting straight. And what I do is help them use it so that they get the information they need to make their daily decisions.
Right.
Just having a computer system and handing it to your accountant to do your taxes doesn't help you run the business.
Right.
I'm interested in creating information that helps a business owner run his business more profitably and hopefully to help him grow.
Yeah, and that's important because sometimes we've joked about how, CPAs typically don't do that.
Well, here's what I say about a CPA. I have nothing against them. They have their value. They're very smart individuals. They have to keep up on current trends.
Correct.
But when most companies just use their CPA for tax, the question I ask the business owner is, name me a business that CPA has run other than his CPA practice.
Correct.
I've run manufacturing companies, service companies, distribution companies, technology companies, and that involves not just the finance end, but the shop floor management, supply chain issues, and so forth.
Yeah, that sounds real valuable to me, actually.
Well, I mentioned the CPA before, and I'm not a CPA, but I do about 200 tax returns a year. And I always get questioned, how can you do tax returns if you're not a CPA? I said, I don't know, but I have 10 CPAs whose returns I do. So why don't you ask them why they're not doing it?
That's really funny.
Because, again, perception and what we see and what we hear versus reality is just two different things.
Wow. What's the most fun part of consulting? What's your favorite type of work to do?
The favorite work is the turnaround work. And when I said before about one foot in the grave, one on a banana peel, you have the latitude to go in and make changes that the company really has no choice. Because when I come in and I say, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to change something, they say, well, why? And usually my answer is, well, what you've been doing isn't working.
Right.
Because you're about to file bankruptcy. You have to be willing to try something new. Now, I'm not guaranteeing it's going to work, but if it doesn't, we'll manage it and then change again so that it does work. But as I'm sure you're aware, you go into a company of any kind of size, and I'm going to say more than 15 employees, they're resistant to change.
Sure.
They don't want to change. I change something the first day I'm there. And then my answer is get used to it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Prior to founding this company, I watched a whole lot of this one particular show called The Prophet, which I'm not sure if you're aware of. So
I think I've seen it once or twice.
okay, so this one guy, Marcus Lemonis, he's the CEO of a Camping World. And he has decided to sort of go on TV and hunt for small businesses that are, as you describe, and sort of come in and actually buy into them, and then serve as a consultant, but also sort of the new boss until they get on the right track. And the resistance to change is evident in each episode, but also the irony is that they're asking for help, so you would think that they'd be open to it, but it's just, I guess, the human condition to just be resistant to change on the individual level, and then you go ahead and you multiply that out by multiple people working for a company, and you get ultra resistance to change.
My lawyer has taught me a phrase that I love to use when I go in and I start to talk about change, and people say, but this is the way we've always done it.
Right.
And I say to them, and how's that working for you?
Right.
Because it's not, obviously.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I wouldn't be there.
Correct. Yeah. And you would think that little particular exchange that we just did would be unnecessary, but yet it often is necessary to just float that obvious statement in order to let it sink in.
Right.
Well, I'm kind of glad that that's your favorite kind of work, because it seems like a good-natured type of work to do, rather than like helping a company that's like super duper successful become slightly more super duper successful. It's more enjoyable to help a company survive.
Well, you'd be surprised if you're successful in the turnaround world, how appreciative, not so much the owner, but the employees, because they get to keep their job. They don't have to learn new things that they really don't want to learn. So you've made it comfortable for them to continue to whatever their end game is, whether it be retirement or having a family or whatever their end game is.
That's important. I mean, you know, I find in a lot of conversations when I try to get to the heart of why people do what they do, a lot of it comes down to helping someone and feeling like you've participated in something larger than what you normally do, or helped someone in the community get from here to there. And, you know, that seems like that's what's going on in that turnaround work for you. So that's nice to hear.
Yes.
All right.
And the bank that they owe the money to is usually pretty happy also.
You know, I try at my best moments to think of a bank as a bunch of human individuals, but it's hard to do that. That you kind of want to think of them as a, you know, vaporous entity shaped like a building with columns that, you know, wants to lock your money behind a gate and earn their own interest on it or something. But
right.
maybe I'm just cynical.
And people sometimes are surprised that when you borrow money from a bank, they don't understand that really all the bank wants is you to pay it back.
Right.
At some point in time.
Yeah, because they're lending you like little bits of other people's money that they're allowed to lend you at a certain percentage, which is an interesting foundational system that we have for money lending. And you're free to comment on that philosophically if we want to go big concept here.
Well, the interesting thing is that you are borrowing other people's money, and then there's the multiplier effect. So people don't understand how it really works. And to be honest with you, most people don't care.
Well, let's pretend they care and try to explain it to them now, if you don't mind.
Let me do it this way. Let me go back in time for people who might remember when IRAs got created. The whole purpose of the IRA being created, in my opinion, and from things I've read, had nothing to do with retirement. It was to give permanent money to banks so that they could lend it to build housing.
Right.
Because IRA money does not move. You put it in at 25, you leave it there till you're 59 and a half. So it's a stable base for banks to lend against to build major projects. And in a lot of cases, back then, it was housing. It was houses, apartment buildings, condos, co-ops, etc.
And the allure of them on the individual side is that when you it won't be taxed when you take it out later in life. Is that how it works?
No. The original IRA is taxed when you take it out.
Okay.
It's taxed. It's done pre-tax, so that you don't pay tax on it when you take it out of your paycheck.
Okay.
So people never realized that. They thought it was all about retirement, and the reason why it worked so well was because IRA money, you accumulate, back then was $2,000 a year. So you put away $2,000 a year. In 6 years, you got $12,000 plus the interest. You don't like your bank anymore, and you say, okay, I don't like Chase anymore. I'm going to take the money out of my IRA and put it into Citibank as an IRA. Well, you go, well, how does that work? Because Chase has already lent against it. Well, you know, there's somebody just like you who didn't like Citibank and put it in Chase.
Okay, yeah.
So even though it moved around, the whole premise still worked.
Gotcha.
Now, of course, we have a million other things that you can do with an IRA, including, you know, all the investment houses and certain partnerships, certain stock deals, and so forth that you can put IRA money into. So it is a little different. But the original IRA was designed as permanent money to fund construction for housing and so forth. So if you take that through, you take $100,000 worth of IRA money, you lend $80,000 of it, and as that money gets paid back on a monthly basis, it's relent. And that's where the multiplier comes in.
Right. And then it gets really hard to conceptualize all the lending based on lending that's happening until you maybe are, if you're not inherently good with numbers, that's when my brain starts to fog over a little bit, and I go, okay, well, I've lost the scent of the original money on this hunt.
I don't know if you remember that commercial, two people tell two people who tell two people,
like
but that's what it is.
Okay, it is. So I'm not wrong in that effect occurring in my brain when you describe this, that it's just like this
explosion
of money lending.
Yeah.
Yes. And if everyone wants their money back at once, it doesn't work anymore.
No, and we've seen a few of those, you know, over the history in various parts of the world.
Yeah. Do you think that the current rules that govern this sort of thing now are good and sustainable, or do you have, you know, in all your years of working with this stuff? I know I'm going a little big concept here, but if you could prescribe any changes to how we actually run the finance system on a larger scale, that you think would be beneficial to everyone, what would they be?
Well, that would be hard to project, but getting back to the retirement side and the lending of money, it works, but then you run into little blips because of birth rates, like when, you know, the baby boomers.
I see.
There's the most of them, and they're pulling their money out now.
Right.
The younger people don't necessarily believe in the system,
right,
and they're not putting the money back in. So other things have to be created to create that pool of wealth that can be lent for housing, car, you know, everything that we borrow money for.
So the system relies on the people sort of replacing themselves at a consistent rate, one, and then those people believing in the system enough to consistently put that money in. So either confidence in the way that the system works changing, or people just not having babies as much are, I guess, the downsides of how the system can be affected by those variables.
And when it doesn't work, we all know from recent experience what the solution is. The government prints money.
Right, and then that has another negative consequence that pops up.
I mean, we could be here for days discussing all of that.
I don't mind that, no. But yeah, and then you get into discussions about the standard by which money is actually based on, right? And that's probably the largest pie in the sky money concept that I could pick your brain about here today.
Well, we're no longer on the gold standard, so
correct.
That has caused its own challenges.
Do you have feelings or opinions or wisdom regarding the gold standard or not, or is it does it not affect your work and the data that you deal with on a?
It really doesn't affect the day-to-day work because the system has somewhat come up with a balance that unless a country totally revalues their currency, the market will stabilize. And I spent a lot of years in foreign exchange. As it relates to the accounting for foreign operations.
Okay.
So everything seems to balance out normally if you leave it to the open market. It's when one country comes in and decides to totally revalue or devalue their currency, and that creates a problem or an imbalance in either trade or the settlement of payments or borrowing from the monetary fund.
Right. So you're trying to, working for these individual companies, figure out how to exchange the right amount of money for a country, and their currency is fluctuating. It becomes difficult to figure out how to continue to do business with them.
Well, as we all know, that a lot of companies, whether they're big or small, are buying product or resources from other countries.
Right.
Sooner or later, that's got to get paid. Now, how does it get paid? In which country's currency does it get paid? Luckily for me, most of the companies I've been involved with settle all their transactions in dollars.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really the company that's supplying us or buying us from us that has to worry about foreign currencies. I don't, because I bill in dollars, I collect in dollars.
Gotcha. And now, have you had to get into the world of cryptocurrency over the last few years at all, or has it popped up on your radar in your work?
I've treated cryptocurrency like poison ivy.
Okay.
I want to stay as far away from it as I can.
Okay.
And as it relates to my tax clients, I tell them the same thing. The regulations that exist today are a problem because years ago, I would have clients that would come to me with their tax information, 3,000 trades in a year, and you'd have to input each and every trade.
Oh, fun.
Then eventually they figured it out, did away with that. Now there's only 6 lines.
Okay. I have a problem putting in my pizza purchases, so
Right.
I wouldn't want to do that.
Cryptocurrency, you have to record on your tax return by coin, and each coin has a serial number.
Okay.
So I had a client, his activity was 16 pages long. He did it himself.
Okay.
And then all I had to do was attach it and put in the summary totals. But he lost $44,000 playing that game.
Right.
So, I try to stay away from it. I deal with it on the tax side, but it's really not my money. It's the client's money.
Gotcha.
But I treat it personally like poison ivy.
Understood. All right, so we're going to wrap up soon. I want to work my way towards non-work things. I know you have a basketball fan bone in your body because you did some of the announcing. Are you still a big basketball fan?
Well, I am in college.
Okay.
College basketball I love. I think it's exciting. I think it's true aspect of anybody can beat anybody on a given day. My passions are baseball and hockey.
Okay. And is baseball number one or is hockey number one?
No, baseball's number one because I played a lot of it.
Okay. What's your team?
Well, my team is the Mets.
Okay, good.
So I was happy last night.
Excellent. I'm wearing a blue that doesn't have an orange, but I'm a Mets fan. But I haven't been to a game that they've won in a while in person, and I convinced myself that I was some sort of bad luck charm because every time I go, they lose. But see, and it just my confirmation bias is active here because I wasn't there last night, and okay, they won, so it proves that I'm the bad luck charm. I just need to stay away from Citi Field. Okay, so baseball and the hockey team. Are we staying with the color scheme? Or?
Well, no. Well, yes, now, but I grew up with the Rangers.
Okay.
The Islanders didn't exist.
Right.
They lived in my neighborhood. I babysat for their children.
The Rangers or the Islanders?
Rangers.
The Rangers.
Because they practiced in New Hyde Park and they lived in the eastern section of Queens where I lived. So we got to know them all and hang out with them. And then when their kids needed babysitters, we said, "Oh, I'll do it. Just bring me home a stick.
Right.
I don't need the payment. I don't need money. Just bring me home a stick." And they were great neighborhood people. We had them in the winter and the Mets in the summer. It was just a great area to grow up in with sports. But yeah, no. Currently, I'm an Islander fan.
Okay, gotcha. That you'll be glad to hear that we have an Islanders fan behind the controls today.
Oh, good.
So okay, awesome. So how often are you able to see sport? I know there was a big sort of pause in live events, but have you gotten to go to a live sporting event recently?
I haven't been to the Islanders recently, but recently I went to a Met game. Yes.
Okay. Yes. How do you feel about Citi Field versus Shea?
Well, I go back to when Shea opened,
Right.
and I actually pitched at Shea Stadium.
Wow.
So it has a little bit of sentimental value, but as a cozy modern ballpark, I love Citi Field.
It is a nice one. Real quick, you got to tell me the story about pitching at Shea.
What happened was I played sandlot ball when I was a kid, when I was in high school. I played for the high school team, but then I played sandlot ball, and I played for the Long Island Mets. And we played from Memorial Day to Labor Day, 96 games. We had all the equipment from the Mets. We had all their uniforms. We just weren't allowed to wear a number that a Met was wearing.
Interesting.
And so I played for them, and we were in a number of different leagues, and one of the All-Star games was in Shea Stadium.
That must have been a thrill to play.
Well, the thing that gets scary as a pitcher is when you stand on the mound, look at the catcher, and see how much room there is behind the catcher that you can throw the ball versus in sandlot ball, the screen is pretty close to the catcher.
Okay.
So that's the scary part. If I throw it and he can't catch it, it's going all the way back there.
Yeah, and they didn't have that cozy little screen that they now, I think, at Citi Field, that you're not going to get hit with a 90
Oh, that's
mile
in the
an hour.
stands, right?
Yeah.
And then what they did is they made the actual wall behind, concrete, so the ball bounces back.
Right.
No, it didn't happen at Shea.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good experience to have had. I don't think everyone has that, so that's a good memory to have, to be actually playing ball at Shea, especially now that it's not there. That's
right.
Definitely cherish that. Well, Marc, I thank you so much for walking me through that very interesting history that bounced around between accounting and radio and sports. I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much for coming in and letting us talk to you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Marc Palker, president of MPP Associates, a boutique consulting firm specializing in accounting, finance, tax, and strategy. We service publicly traded companies, privately owned, and family businesses. We've been in business for over 40 years and have helped a lot of companies on Long Island stay out of trouble. Our new thing is the entrepreneurial spirit that has been coming along after the pandemic, and we help those people too. I can be reached at mppalker@cs.com.